The Basilica of Santa Maria degli Angeli dei Martiri is a Catholic place of worship in Rome located in Piazza della Repubblica. It is the church where the official ceremonies of the Italian Republic are held. The building grew out of Michelangelo Buonarroti's arrangement in 1562 of the central hall, Frigidarium, of the Baths of Diocletian, by order of Pope Pius IV at the instance of the Sicilian priest Antonio del Duca, uncle of Michelangelo's faithful disciple Jacopo del Duca. Antonio del Duca urged the construction for a long time, following a vision he had in the summer of 1541, when he allegedly saw light more than white snow rising from the Baths of Diocletian with the 7 martyrs, Saturninus, Cyriacus, Largo, Smaragdo, Sicinius, Thracian, and Pope Marcellus I, in the center. This would convince him that a temple dedicated to the 7 angels should be built, so he marked the names of the 7 angels on the columns inside the Frigidarium. So he began to devise a possible construction of the church dedicated to the 7 angels and the 7 martyrs, but Pope Paul III did not support the idea. In 1543 Antonio del Duca had a painting made of the Madonna among 7 angels, a copy of the mosaic in Issei. Mark's Basilica. The painting is currently placed in the center of the apse of the Basilica of Issei. Mary of the Angels and Martyrs. However, to see, albeit briefly, the dream of the construction of the latter basilica realized, Anthony had to wait a long time, since with the election of Pope Julius III the Pope's nephews built a hunting enclosure and stables for horses within the baths. However, with the pontificate of Pope Marcellus II and Pope Paul IV the conditions for the construction of the basilica began to occur. The church thus came into being as a result of Pope Pius IV's papal bull of July 27, 1561, and took the name Beatissimi Virgini et Omnium Angelorum et Martyrum. Pius IV entrusted the project in 1561 to the elderly Michelangelo, who was working on St. Peter's Basilica at the time. Michelangelo intervened in the bath complex by restoring the Tepidarium Hall and demonstrating a modern, non-destructive attitude toward the archaeological remains. He limited himself to delimiting, with a few wall partitions, 3 contiguous bays, covered with cross-vaulting, to which 2 square side chapels were added, thus creating an ecclesiastical building singular for its time, with a spatiality dilated laterally rather than longitudinally, despite the advice of the patrons. The main axis started from the vestibule, carved out of a small room used as an amphitheum of passage to the calidarium, and ended in the choir carved out of the natatio area. At Michelangelo's time there were 2 other entrances on either side of the transept. Work continued after Michelangelo's death by Giacomo del Duca, Antonio's nephew. The work continued until the mid-18th century, when the side entrances to the transept were closed through the chapels of San Bruno and the Niccolò Albergati Chapel. The 18th century saw the work of Luigi Vanvitelli, 1750, who decorated in the style of the time the sober interior commissioned by Michelangelo, of which no documentation remains. Vanvitelli also intervened to recreate an architectural uniformity that had been lost with various interventions subsequent to Michelangelo. Through the 8 masonry columns he created a composition in the transition between the vestibule and the cross, and between the cross itself and the chancel. On the square of the exedra he created a facade with a tympanum portal, architecture typical of the Roman thermal structure, which Vanvitelli connected to the church through pilasters and horizontal bands. In addition, Vanvitelli arranged all the paintings from the Vatican Basilica. Vanvitelli also oversaw the transport to Santa Maria degli Angeli of the large altarpieces from St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican, which had been replaced by mosaic copies for conservation reasons. They were threatened by moisture. St. Mary of the Angels thus resulted in a very rich picture gallery with works from the 16th to the 18th century, from Domenichino's martyrdom of St. Sebastian, Pompeo Battoni's Fall of Simon the Magician, Carlo Maratta's Baptism of Jesus, and Pierre Sublera's Mass of St. Basil. An altarpiece by Giovanni Odazzi is also located in the transept. Salvatore Rosa, Carlo Maratta, Armando Diaz, Paolo Theon di Revel, Vittorio Emanuele Orlando and Pope Pius IV are buried in the church. It is currently often used for state funerals or those of Italian army figures. The basilica was the setting for the wedding of Victor Emmanuel III of Savoy, King of Italy, still crown prince at the time of the wedding, and Princess Elena of Montenegro, daughter of King Nicholas of Montenegro. In the adjoining Carthusian monastery, also converted from the Baths of Diocletian, one of the sections of the Roman National Museum was housed. With the unification of Italy, the Carthusian fathers were removed from the church and its monastery. At first the cloistered area was left to the military, then to the friars of Francis of Paula, and finally to the diocesan clergy. With the marriage of Victor Emmanuel III, this basilica became a state church, a rank it retains to this day. On July 20, 1920, Pope Benedict XV elevated the church to a minor basilica. Inside, the circular vestibule is a circular passage hall with a domed ceiling. It was probably the nymphaeum of the Baths of Diocletian in ancient Roman times. This hall was housed between the Calidarium, which has now disappeared, and the Tepidarium, and was included in the longitudinal axis of the church by Michelangelo Buonarroti, who inserted 4 aedicules with tympanums, which preserved funerary monuments. In Roman times, the vault of the dome was an open circular opening that allowed rainwater to penetrate and run into the pool below. With the transformation of the Baths of Diocletian into a church, it became necessary to transform the oculus with a stained glass window. Michelangelo and Vanvitelli installed lanterns there that were later demolished. In the last century, lanterns were installed there that later proved unsuitable to withstand the weather. The new lantern, by Italian-American artist Narcissus Quagliata, has a diameter of about 2 meters divided into 8 segments composed of 24 multicolored glass panes. 3 other lenses placed at different heights but all placed in the southern area complete the work. The 3 lenses converge the sun's rays downward, causing the light reflected back to the floor to be pink in color that advances very slowly across the floor itself, creating the illusion of earthly movement in space. The sun, thus, reaches the exact center of the floor at the 2 equinoxes and solstices indicating noon in Rome. The transept is located in the ancient frigidarium of the Baths of Diocletian. It later underwent various renovations, whether by Michelangelo, Jacopo del Duca or Vanvitelli. Each of the 3 artists respected the original structure of the Roman construction, including the original dimensions. The height of the crossvaults is 29 meters and the columns, including the base of the capital and the entablature, reach 17.14 meters, while their circumference is 5.10 meters and their diameter 1.62 meters. The walls are adorned with pilasters and pilasters painted to imitate Cottonello red marble, with framed panels in which there are 8 original paintings from St. Peter's Basilica and placed in situ in the first half of the 18th century. The illumination of the transept is provided by large windows in the arches leading to the side chapels plus other large windows on the sides in the shape of crescents. Above these crescents, Niccolò Ricciolini depicted prophets, sibyls, and condottieri. Only the existing large windows on the access arches to the vestibule and chancel, which already existed in Vanvitelli's time, are different from the others. In fact, they consist of moldings with double volutes.